Hello and welcome. I'm Brian Macasero. Welcome to Rappler Talk. According to government data, there were about 1,000 victims of human trafficking in 2013. The 2014 Trafficking in Persons report by the U.S. State Department says the Philippines' overall number of convictions remained low compared to the size of the problem. Human trafficking remains one of the biggest threats to OFWs today. While the recent case of Mary Jane Veloso highlights the human cost of allowing trafficking to persist in the country, migrant workers' rights advocate Susan Toots Ople says trafficking almost always starts with illegal recruitment, the promise of overseas employment. What can we do to solve this? Joining us today is migrant workers' rights advocate Susan Toots Ople and POEA Director Robert Larga to discuss the issue further. Good afternoon to both of you. Thank you for joining us. Our hashtag today is Fight Trafficking. Okay. That's what we wanted to discuss today. Coming from the recent State of the Nation address from President Aquino, human trafficking and illegal recruitment wasn't really mentioned in the latest SONA. I mean, can I get your thoughts on, what does that mean? Because the problem is obviously, significant in the country. Do you think that this administration has been, doing a good job in addressing human trafficking, illegal recruitment?
Well, Ryan, we, as advocates, we'd always like to hear the President espousing our advocacies, but I think the tenor of the President's speech was more of his own personal gratitude to the people who have been helping him, and much as we wanted more paragraphs devoted to our OFWs, them being our modern day heroes, and of course the fight against human trafficking, I think actions speak louder than words, and we're still hoping that for the rest of his term, more can be done to fight trafficking.
More, like for example?
More convictions.
More convictions.
Greater emphasis on prevention, and more cases of OFWs being trafficked resolved in their favor.
Okay. Attorney Larga, as someone who's working in government service, can I get your thoughts on how do you feel our government is doing in addressing this issue?
All right. Well, I think it is important to note that during the onset of the Aquino administration, I think they set 22-point agenda on labor and employment, and actually 11 of those, if I counted it correctly, would pertain to overseas employment, and much also of those 11-point agenda pertaining to overseas employment would actually be on the area of protection. I think the President was clear on that during his address in the beginning, that I think central to his administration is the protection of migrant workers. Now, I agree with Ms. Toots that I think one of the, human trafficking actually starts almost always with illegal recruitment. And if we go by the POA record, according to those who actually go to the office and complain about illegal recruitment, there was a decline in the number of cases of illegal recruitment cases compared, let's say, 3 years before the Aquino administration.
So you have seen significant improvement in that area?
I think so, if we go by the POA record. We have recorded 601 cases in 5 years, from 2010 to up to June of 2015. And 2 years before that was actually 900 plus complaints of illegal recruitment. So for only 3 years, compared to, let's say, 5 years, from 2010 to 2015, I think there's significant decline. But I think what we would like also to say here is that one victim is too many for us. I think while we have noted a decrease in the number of cases reporting to us of cases of illegal recruitment, I think there's still a problem, and I think that's something that we are still going to resolve and poses as a challenge in our overseas migration.
Right. I wanted to go back to what Toots said about human trafficking usually starts with illegal recruitment.
Yeah.
Can you expand a little bit further on what you mean by that? And so what's the difference between illegal recruitment and human trafficking.
Yeah, for human trafficking, you have to look at the element of exploitation. There are three elements that make an offense a human trafficking one.
Okay.
And one is the act, how they were recruited. Was it done through coercion? Was there fraud or deception involved? The means, how were they moved from one place to another? Human trafficking can be inbound, meaning domestic, and it can also be overseas. Where they did they leave the country via the back door, meaning from Manila to Zamboanga, Tawi-Tawi, and then onwards to Sabah, and then to the Middle East. So that's also an important element. And then the third one is the purpose. Why were they being trafficked? Is it for sex exploitation, forced labor trafficking, or human slavery, or was it to harvest their organs? So there are different types of human trafficking, but those are the three elements that one looks for. Unlike in illegal recruitment, you can be illegally recruited just for plain profit, and you stay in the country. So you were promised a job in New Zealand, they got your money, but you never left. Or you could have been illegally recruited, sent to Syria, a place where the government itself has been discouraging people to go to, where there's an ongoing civil war, and be exploited there. Your passport taken away, your freedom also taken away, and being worked without any rest, and with little pay.
So that makes someone a at that point, that makes someone a trafficking victim.
Then you cross from being just an illegal recruitment a victim to a human trafficking victim because of the elements and because exploitation exists.
So going off of that, I wanted to ask Attorney, so under Philippine laws, what are our laws that address human trafficking, and why is it that convictions take so long? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, we have the 2003 law, the Anti-Trafficking in Persons Law of 2003, and it defined actually the crime of human trafficking or trafficking in persons, and there are a number of ways by which human trafficking could be committed. But as mentioned by Ms. Toots, there are three main essential elements: the act, the means, and the purpose. So all of those must come together for us to be able to really identify a situation of trafficking. Now, the law of 2003 was amended in 2010, expanding a little bit the coverage of human trafficking, and also providing more protection to victims. Now, in relation to, let's say, illegal recruitment being part of an element also of human trafficking, because the first element pertains to act, and one of the acts actually one of the acts there is actually recruitment. So when one is being recruited for the purpose of exploitation, that's human trafficking. Now, if that person recruiting doesn't have a license, then he is equally guilty of illegal recruitment. So therefore, you have a case of illegal recruitment, and at the same time, if you're recruiting without license for the purpose of exploitation with deceit, with deception, and or fraud, then you will also be committing trafficking in persons.
So let's say I'm an OFW. I've been, I think I've been duped by a recruiter, or that I may be a victim of trafficking. What do I do? What do I do first? I can't really afford a lawyer. I owe so much to the recruiter. Wala na akong pera. Anong gagawin ko?
Well, of course, you can come to PUEA or to Blaset Center to provide assistance to you. Now, in the case of PUEA, we have a legal assistance division, we have the prosecution division, we have the operations and surveillance division. Now, if one needs to really, would want to file a criminal case, then we can assist the person by assisting in the preparation of the complaint affidavit. We will also accompany him before the prosecutor's office for purposes of preliminary investigation. And if the case is filed in court, we could collaborate with the public prosecutor or the prosecutors of the Department of Justice to prosecute the cases in court. So those are the things that we could offer at POEA.
And these are public services?
These are public services, and those are rendered for free.
Okay.
Yeah. Can I add to that?
Yeah,
because
go ahead.
how can you seek help if you're on site? Meaning you're an OFW, you're in Saudi Arabia, you're a domestic worker, and our government is, has shrunk into one embassy that's kind of distant from where you are. Yung suggestion namin is that if they can find a way to contact your family so that they know that you are being victimized or exploited. Kung hindi nyo makontak yung pamilya, pwedeng makontak yung agency nila. Yung agency nila na nagpadala sa kanila sa abroad.
Okay.
And kung may mga bahay, Ryan, in the Middle East, there are houses where the employers take away the SIM card of the domestic worker. But because the house itself has Wi-Fi, when the domestic worker or the kasambahay gets to know the password, she can still use her phone.
Like
That's
Viber.
why, and via Facebook.
Facebook.
In fact, very interesting, but a lot of our cases now, we get through social media.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so, and we also try to resolve through social media and with the help of the Filipino community leaders and our embassy there.
So, you were talking about how if a Filipino goes abroad, that their family can contact the recruiter here. So so when the Filipino leaves, the responsibility of the recruiter doesn't end there.
Yes.
Right, is that correct?
That is correct.
What responsibilities do they still have to, to the Filipino, to the worker that they recruited to work in another country once they're gone?
Yeah. Well, of course, the rules and regulations of POA require licensed recruitment agencies or the deploying agencies to monitor the situation of the worker, seeing to it that the worker actually has been transferred to the supposed employer. And in cases where there is a need for emergency, they need to provide assistance. And along this line, one of the things that were introduced also in our laws is the mandatory insurance coverage, that every agency hired OFW is supposed to be covered. So if there is any problem with this, let's say there is the OFW met an accident and he died, now the repatriation of rebates will be covered by the mandatory insurance. If a disability, that will also be covered. And of course, if there is a need for medical evacuation or repatriation, medical evacuation, the mandatory insurance coverage will also cover that. So there, actually, you're right in saying that the recruitment agency's role with respect to the deployment of the worker doesn't stop with the worker setting foot in the destination country. The recruiter or the deploying agency needs to constantly monitor the situation of the worker.
Now, going back to, we're talking about the definition of human trafficking and illegal recruitment. One of the most famous cases recently of someone who was supposedly, it's a big debate online now, was Mary Jane Veloso, the overseas Filipino worker who's on death row in Indonesia right now. Is she a victim of human trafficking? Is she an OFW under, what do you guys think?
Well, again, we go back to the elements. I guess if you ask different people, they may say different, they can interpret the law in different ways. But was there deception involved? Yes, because she was promised a job, and that was not real. It was bogus, so there was deception. How was she deployed? She was deployed as a tourist. She did not pass through the POEA. So her recruiter was really violating already our law. And then what was the intention above board? Apparently not. Mary Jane was being exploited. Her vulnerability and her circumstance were being exploited for drug trafficking. Was it her fault? Did she give her consent? It doesn't really matter, because under the law, even if she consented to do it, if she's a victim of human trafficking, then the penalty is really, the onus is on the recruiter.
And this recruiter may or may not have been operating illegally, no? So can I get your thoughts on that, Attorney?
Well, I agree with what Ms. Toots said. Under the facts and circumstances that we've been hearing from television, from newspapers, it would really be a case of illegal recruitment. One, because the recruiter doesn't have a license. We don't have any record of the respondents in this particular case,
as
that
far
they
as
are
the
being
PUA.
Registered with PUA, nor they are connected with a recruitment agency. Second, is she a victim of human trafficking? Apparently, the elements are there. There was recruitment. There was deception, because he was promised a job as a, I understand, a domestic worker. And then, was she exploited? Well, she was being, tricked to carrying, apparently, drugs, to Indonesia, and where she was caught. So all of those elements are present here. But of course, this goes to the court. And the appreciation of the court may be different depending on the weight of the evidence. But if we go by the elements, I think the elements are there.
Toots, how common is the story of Mary Jane Veloso with our OFWs abroad? Is it common that a lot of our OFWs get tricked into drug trafficking?
Well, first, the perception that all of those who are currently behind bars in different countries, especially in China, in Malaysia,
and I think there's around 80, 90
Saudi,
right now.
I think there are 94 cases,
and
some of them are, not all, but huge numbers because of drugs. There's this perception that all of these people, all of these Filipinos are OFWs. It's not always the case. Some are really travelers, and some are OFWs who were asked to bring stuff. And admittedly, there are OFWs in Saudi Arabia, for example, who are involved in drugs, either as users or as peddlers. But to say that all of them are OFWs, that's why we always caution media to be very careful, because that person, as reported in the news, may or may not be an OFW.
So it's important to look at it on a case-by-case basis,
yes,
basically.
the distinction has to be made.
We have a question from social media related to that, from @McBasa on Twitter. What do you say to those who refuse to believe it exists, and that Mary Jane deserves to pay the price?
Well, first of all, capital punishment, to me, as my own personal belief, is too harsh. No?
Too harsh.
Yeah. But that is Indonesian law, and the offense happened on Indonesian soil. What the question was?
I mean, how would you respond to those who say that that Mary Jane deserves, to be sentenced to death?
I don't think she deserves to be sentenced to death. I think that she was forced by circumstances, and that if the element of redemption, I think this is something that she would never, you'd never see her do this again in her lifetime, and just judging by her own background, this is a very simple woman, and trapped in quite unfortunate circumstance.
Yes. I mean, this is a problem that is not, Mary Jane is just one of these stories. So what can we do as a community to help prevent another Mary Jane story from happening. You know, from here.
There are Mary Jane stories and there are Almira stories. Almira is the OFW who was ironed, whose arms and the front of her body was ironed by her Saudi employer or Kuwaiti employer. There are cases involving scalded OFWs. These are all OFWs treated like objects by unfeeling and quite brutal foreign employers. So what needs to happen? There has to be behavioral change, not only in the OFW herself, but also the employers, the agencies. That's why we're pushing for ethical recruitment, as that has been the battle cry of the CSOs, and also for higher ethical standards when dealing with labor migration.
Attorney,
yeah, well, in the case of PUA, I think from our perspective, I think crucial here as well is the availability of information with respect to how to, you know, not to be a victim of this kind of arrangements. And that's why we have been collaborating with the Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency, PDEA, in our education campaign for OFWs, for communities, etc. So we have this pre-employment orientation seminar that we are tackling in the issue of drug couriers, because I think our overseas Filipino workers or those, you know, intending to work abroad should be forewarned about, you know, these syndicates or these drug traffickers that actually prey on the vulnerability of Filipino workers going out of the country for work. So I think it's important that you know, we get, you know, we educate our people on that so that they do not become victim of illegal drug trafficking. So I think we're continuing on this, and we have actually last year signed an agreement renewing our agreement and collaboration with the Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency along this line. So we are actually reinforcing our education program for OFWs.
Okay. So we have another question from Facebook. Actually, it's related to the upcoming Philippine elections in 2016. As we know, this administration only has 1 more year left, so we'll be changing presidents as well as national and local positions. So this one of our Facebook followers on Rappler is asking if Binay did Vice President Jejomar Binay did anything to solve the problem in human trafficking or address the problem during his term as the presidential advisor on OFW students.
Yeah, based on my personal experience, and again, as a non-political player, you know, but based purely on our interaction with the Office of the Vice President. Yes, I think to be fair, he was really proactive. We would sometimes get calls from him directly asking about certain cases, or him reporting to us, giving us updates about certain cases. He regularly called for AYACAT meetings. AYACAT stands for the Interagency Council Against Trafficking, and we were always asked to present. All the agency members would present what cases they've been handling, and so I think he was effective, and I think he was quite professional about it.
Controversies aside here.
Yeah, politics aside, just looking at work performance.
So, I mean, going into the 2016 elections, what do you hope to see change or improve from what we've observed in the past, 6 years that President Aquino has been in office?
I would like to see a jobs roadmap. It's not enough that, well, the president said that OFWs are coming home, that more jobs are being created. We'd like to see a breakdown of the data that supports that thesis, and probably a roadmap so that the OFWs themselves can start planning. in their provinces, which are the growth areas, that they can put up small businesses and maybe have streamlined procedures just to entice them to come home. And we really would like to see a department of OFWs be created, perhaps in the next administration, because it's tiresome, even for us as an NGO, to go to different agencies just to solidify what services an aggrieved OFW can get.
So you mean
government.
a consolidated?
Yes,
a more consolidated.
Like, for example, if you file a case, the administrative case against an illegal recruiter falls under POEA.
Oh.
Now, if your spouse or your daughter or your son is abroad, you seek the help of the DFA, and then the benefits are with OWA, and then if you have money claims, you go to the NLRC. There has to be a way to simplify all
So
these
you have
things.
to run all over the metro just to do all of those things, no?
Yes.
Attorney, do you have any hopes for, for the next term?
Well, of course, we just hope that illegal recruitment cases will go down or drop significantly as we tread another 6 years. And of course, we have invested so much into the campaign against illegal recruitment, and it would seem that those investments are paying off because of the decline. But of course, the problem is still there. And as I mentioned earlier, one victim is too many for us. So I think we need to continue what we have started, to campaign against illegal recruitment. We need to engage more sectors in the campaign, and we need to strengthen our public education campaign as well. And of course, we need to have a more robust investigation and prosecution, so that we get the message across to illegal recruiters and trafficking that the government means business.
Any last thoughts that you want to share before we go?
Yes, I think human trafficking also strikes at the heart of quality of life issues. Unless we improve, I can understand why we can't raise salaries to be as at par with our neighbors, but we can do something to improve the quality of life even here in Metro Manila. Because if you look at it, it's also a push factor for migration. If you have other economies doing so well and safer for the families, and with an educational system that really works for the children, then that contrast will continue to attract those who fall into that kind of promise of a better life. And this is what the human traffickers are really selling, that illusion of a better life via trafficking.
So we should remove that vulnerability somehow, no?
Yes, even improving the quality of life, that already makes a big difference.
Attorney, any last thoughts?
Well, of course, the fighting illegal recruitment and human trafficking is not the job alone of a single agency or only of the government. I think it is a collaboration of both the government and the private sector, and we're lucky that we have a very strong civil society groups. Well, an example, of course, is OFWs. So I think we need to constantly see each other, sit down at the table, and identify measures to be able to address this issue of illegal recruitment and human trafficking. And we're seeing this kind of partnership between government and the non-government organizations, and I think we need to continue. But we also hope that overseas migration will become a matter of choice, but not as a matter of necessity.
One last thing for our OFWs watching today, how can they get in touch with you on social media or email? Can you share with us your contact information?
Yes, they can reach us via email, blasoplecenter@gmail.com, via Facebook, www.facebook.com/BlasOple Policy Center. And I'm also on Twitter. They just need to search Susan Ople.
Okay, sir.
Well, of course, we have the website. So the contact details are there. So if they need anything for PUA, just go to the website. They can contact the the contact details of the offices are there. We are also on Twitter. Our administration is Twitter, and of course we are on Facebook as well, particularly the anti-illegal recruitment campaign. So we are still improving on our social media facilities, but they can reach us anytime.
Thank you so much for joining us. We've been speaking to migrant workers advocate Susan Toots Ople and POEA Director Robert Larga on the issue of human trafficking. I'm Ryan Macasero. Thank you for joining us.